We're back, joined by our duty expert on matters involving Asia. He is Gordon Chang. He also fulfills that role for Forbes.com, WorldAffairsJournal.com, and also for Fox News. And we find him in Hong Kong at a very interesting and, frankly, quite alarming moment, I imagine, for the Chinese regime in Beijing. Their stock market seems to be in free fall, and we'll talk with Gordon about both that, what it portends, and what the Chinese are doing about it. Gordon, welcome back. Good to have you.
Thank you so much, Frank.
Glad to have an excellent line. You sound like you're next door rather than halfway around the world, but give us a flavor of how things look from Hong Kong in the aftermath of, by some estimates, a $3.7 trillion fall in the value of the Chinese stock market.
In the last 3 weeks, Chinese stocks have fallen across the board. There are three main indices. One of them is off 26.9%, the second 35.0%, and the last one 37.4%. And there's been a loss of value of about $3.7 trillion in those 3 weeks. China announced its stock market rescue plan over the weekend, and on Monday, the first day of trading after that, stocks were mixed, certainly much lower than most people thought, because Beijing had thrown everything that it could, including the kitchen sink, literally and figuratively, into the mix. China has been loosening margin rules, hoping that people would put up their homes for collateral for stock market debt. This is really serious, because you have a lot of people now who are underwater.
You have people, and it sounds as though you have corporations that must be underwater. The Chinese have been engineering infusions of cash into those companies, I gather, through sort of mandatory blue chip stock purchases. Is that right, Gordon? And what are the likely repercussions of that?
Yes. Essentially, a lot of Chinese entities are now holding on to unrealized losses because they have been forced in one way or another to take positions in the stock market in order to support stock valuations. And this has been going on at least since the end of June. The stock market rescue plan announced over the weekend contemplates that brokerages and mutual fund trading companies will hold on to stock and actually make investments. Also, the Chinese Sovereign Wealth Fund has been buying shares, as was announced a few hours ago. So all of these entities are now holding shares which have been going down in value over the last 3 weeks. And so it is a serious situation of a lot of losses being stuffed into entities that are now weakened financially because of this. And this means we could have a systemic collapse, because this is not just a stock market fall, it has now been transmitted into all sorts of important institutions.
Yeah, well, Gordon, you have been, of course, raising the warning for years about a coming collapse of China. In fact, that was the title of one of your books. This would suggest, as you say, that there are profound economic shocks that are taking place for the Chinese economy, but also for the polity, the People's Republic of China and its Communist Party leadership. Is that right?
Absolutely, because this stock market bull run began last summer, and it began because the Chinese government wanted it to occur, and they've been publicly taking credit for the increase in stock basically for 12 months. So they've identified themselves as being responsible for the run-up in stocks, which means that they are now really going to be blamed for the resulting fall. And what the Chinese government has tried to do is to shift responsibility to Morgan Stanley and to foreign stock manipulators, as they're called. This is going to have repercussions on relations between the United States and China, because obviously Morgan Stanley, which was just calling it as it saw it in terms of the market movements, is not responsible for the fall in the Chinese market. But they're blaming that institution and foreigners for what's going on. This is going to be interesting.
This hardly seems like the moment for the Chinese to engage in another part of the world where they have perhaps strategic interests. We were just talking with John Sitilides in the previous segment, Gordon, about the difficulties Greece is experiencing at the moment and the possibility that the Russians might make mischief. He actually suggested that there's a possibility that the Chinese might as well, with the new Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank. Is that possible in your judgment? I had thought that bank was going to be confined to investments in Asia rather than Europe.
Yeah, the new bank is supposed to support President Xi Jinping's One Belt, One Road initiatives. Those initiatives are connecting Chinese ports and cities to Europe through the Middle East and Africa. So it's entirely possible that the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank would be trying to put money into a place like Greece. Now, China's been making a lot of politically motivated investments around the world and loans. So, for instance, it's on the hook for a lot of money in Venezuela, which is never going to get back. And so, it's entirely possible that the Chinese have been contemplating doing that. Now, however, with the problems in the stock market, which could have much broader implications for China, they very well may not have the resources to realize these ambitions of trying to dominate a weak country like Greece.
Those ambitions are there, though, and I think it's right to point out. Gordon, let me turn back to the region. There's been two developments that I wanted to just get your quick take on. One is, I understand there's been a new security law adopted in China that seems quite far-reaching and potentially quite problematic for those who have hoped for some kind of opening, some liberalization in China. The other is, apparently, the Chinese are now on track to begin operating a 10,000-foot runway, which would accommodate most of the Chinese military aircraft out of a part of the Spratly Islands known as the Fiery Cross Reef. Quickly, give us your sense on both of those topics.
Yes, I think the Chinese are going to be operating military aircraft off of that reef and others, and they're going to be militarizing its reclamations. There's no doubt about that, because they want to put together and be able to enforce the South China Sea Air Defense Identification Zone, like the one they declared in November 2013 over the East China Sea. In terms of the national security law, this is just one really regressive measure that has been put in place. More are coming down the pike, including a counterterrorism law, and most significantly, a law on foreign non-governmental organizations, NGOs. This is an indication that the Communist Party wants to completely control all discourse, all activity in China, and it's an ambition that is really striking. You have to go back to the Maoist era to see a Chinese government really with such broad hopes for what it can do.
You know, I'm always reminded of the comment that then President Bill Clinton made when told that the Chinese might try to control the Internet. I think he somewhat contemptuously said, "Good luck." At a moment, Gordon, where back here in the United States, there is beginning to be some serious reconsideration, I think, at least in Congress, about the advisability of relinquishing our own sort of management arrangements for critical pieces of the Internet. Do you think that the Chinese are poised to try to pick up whatever control we surrender for exactly the purpose you're talking about, domestic repression?
Absolutely, Frank. Clearly the Chinese want to control the Internet, not just in China, but around the world, because they want to control the discourse on China. And they would just love to be able to censor what they consider to be anti-Communist Party views that are expressed in places such as Greenland, Iceland, Europe, the United States, wherever. So clearly, this is something we should not be surrendering, especially to the likes of China and Russia, which of course are going to gang up on us when it comes to Internet questions.
Gordon Chang, as always, thank you for these insights, and we look forward to getting you back from Hong Kong. Travel safe over there, and your firsthand accounts of what's taking place are deeply appreciated. Keep up the good work, my friend. We'll talk with you again very soon. We'll talk, I hope, with the rest of you again tomorrow. Same time, same station. Until then, thanks for listening. This is Frank Gaffney, over and out.